The nationalist thinks himself a follower of the will to power. Could this be any further from the truth? For the nationalist desires nothing more than to be a slave. To be a slave to an autocrat. To be a slave to a nation. To be a slave to human nature. To be a slave to history. Allow me to elaborate. The nationalist dreams of being the utterly devoted servant of an autocrat. If history has taught us anything, it has taught us that. Millions of nationalists gleefully march off and die in their masses to serve the ambitions of a leader who doesn't even regard them as possessing the intelligence necessary to govern themselves. There is no greater honour than to serve as the Führer's meat shield. Where is the will to power in that? Since when was the will to power the will to be cannon fodder? The nationalist will eagerly suffer and die in service of the ambitions of an autocrat who despises them. Where is the will to power in that? Where is the will to power in joyfully wandering into your grave to serve a leader who despises you? And then there is the nation, the glorious in-group. The desire to suffer and die for some delusional conception of the in-group. Where is the will to power in launching yourself into the grave out of a desire to serve some unhinged conception of the in-group? To suffer and die for some deranged idea of the in-group. Where is the will to power in such things? Where is the will to power in having an individual identity so incredibly weak that you can only prop your crippled ego up via an utter obsession with the in-group? And as for human nature, the nationalist alleges that we must be nationalists due to the inherently tribalistic and cruel character of human nature. Expressed in the nationalist appeal to nature is the desire to be the slave of human nature. They do not consider exercising agency or self-control. They do not consider their capacity to choose cooperation and compassion. They wish only to be the slaves of the worst aspects of their nature. They wish to be primal savages utterly dominated by the very worst tendencies. Puppets to the primal animalistic side of human nature. Where is the will to power in eagerly accepting complete domination by the worst parts of human nature? Where is the will to power in willing enslavement to the most grotesque elements of one's nature? Where is the will to power in the complete inability to exercise agency and self-control? And as for history, the nationalist alleges that we must be nationalists because we have always been tribalists. We should do nationalism because we have always done tribalism. Expressed in the nationalist appeal to history is the desire to be the slave of tradition. The desire to cede one's power in favour of utter domination by tradition. Where is the will to power in that? The eagerness to abandon one's agency in favour of a mindless enslavement to tradition. Where is the will to power in eagerly abandoning one's power in favour of being utterly dominated and totally enslaved by the autocrat, the nation, human nature, and tradition? Where is the will to power in a willing abandonment of one's agency in favour of domination and enslavement to such things? And if the relationship of the nationalist with these things is not one of domination and enslavement, then these words have no meaning. The nationalist dreams of nothing more than death for nation, death for leader, death for human nature, death for history. They willingly and eagerly enslave themselves to each and every one of these things. They surrender their own power to be utterly enslaved and dominated by autocrat, nation, nature, and tradition. The nationalist may think himself a follower of the will to power. In truth, the nationalist is very often amongst the most refined and pure embodiments of the will to slavery.